Is being Prime Minister the toughest job in Britain? Many people think they could do the job better themselves. Well, tonight we put two such armchair critics to the test. Meet Nick Langston-Able and Christine Warren. Nick is 33 and a school teacher in economics from Bristol.
People can see through the spin. I think people can tell when a politician isn't answering the question. And I'm going to try as hard as I can to answer the question as it's put.
Christine is 27 and a public relations consultant from London.
I've had situations where I've had to think on my feet really, really quickly. And it's that skill that I think that I can probably use to my advantage.
We're going to challenge Nick and Christine to take on just one day from the Prime Minister's hectic diary of meetings, visits and media grillings.
Prime Minister, you've lost control of this crisis, haven't you? You're not interested in the public's opinion of your government?
I'm always willing to listen.
Who will buckle under the pressure and who will show the mettle it takes to be #1 as they become Blair for a day? To give Nick and Christine a fighting chance, we put them both through an intensive media training course.
Tony Blair, commenting on the peace marches, I thought he had some nice phrases. I do not seek unpopularity as a badge of honour, but it is sometimes the price of leadership and the cost of conviction. Quite telling.
Neither of them have had to face the press before, and they're going to need all the help they can get.
Now, you're not obligated to answer each and every question you get asked, which is probably going to come as a surprise to you. You're not there to beat the interviewer. This isn't a kind of arm wrestling match with that person. You're there to connect with the audience that is represented by that journalist. He or she just happens to be the person who is asking the questions, which you are choosing to answer or not.
For Nick and Christine's day as Prime Ministers, we've come up with a hypothetical news scenario for them to deal with. Tensions in the Middle East have caused fuel prices to escalate. Protesters, angered at the high level of fuel tax, are blockading oil refineries. Petrol stations are running dry as the country grinds to a halt. Yet the protesters have the support of the majority, and the PM's popularity rating is at rock bottom. Downing Street experts have given us a diary of events for Nick and Christine to perform. They'll be doing different tasks, but we've made sure both their diaries will be equally testing. Each of our two Prime Ministers will have a press aide to help them throughout their day.
And then we've got quite a few bits.
Anne's first job is to update Christine on what the morning papers are saying.
It's not great news on the press. The tabloids are...
Yeah. Simon.
Hi, how are you?
Morning.
Meanwhile, Nick's having a breakfast meeting with his press aide, Simon.
Basically, it's just got worse. I mean, I think today is going to be an absolutely crucial day for you in terms of your Prime Ministership and in terms of regaining control of this crisis.
So...
Media schedules.
Media schedules. Well, we've had some bids. There's been a Radio 5 Live have asked you to do a phone-in with John Pienaar this morning. I think our advice would be to do it.
And it's a phone-in from the public?
It's members of the general public. I know there'll be difficult questions and it'll be hostile.
Got an interview with Fiona Phillips from GMTV.
OK, nice one.
Newsnight have asked if you will go on with Kirsty Walk.
Hoping that we're going to have lunch with Janet Street Porter, editor-at-large on the Independent on Sunday at 1:30. And then at 10 o'clock we've got a bid in from the BBC One 10 o'clock news. That would be down the line from the Millbank studios with Fiona Bruce.
Both Nick and Christine have been given real prime ministerial red boxes of official papers to help them. But how well they use the information they've been given is up to them.
Hello.
Nick's first appointment of his day is an interview in Downing Street for GMTV with Fiona Phillips. He's expecting an easy ride, but Fiona has other ideas.
I've had a word with Fiona this morning and gone through some of the areas she wants to talk about. Obviously, she's going to go in very hard on the fuel crisis, very hard on the idea that you're out of touch, you're out of control. New Labour was supposed to be about, you know, listening to people, but actually on this issue, you know, you won't open your ears.
Hello. Hi. Yeah. Hi, nice to see you again. Taking over. Thanks very much for coming. 10, 9, 8, run B2, 6, 5.
Stand by.
Untitled.
Good luck, everyone.
1, 0. Prime Minister, thanks very much for joining us again this morning.
You're very welcome.
Quite frankly, you're in a mess. People say you're overweeningly arrogant. You're out of touch with what's going on. Did you see this coming, the current crisis you find yourself in?
I think, Fiona, we need to put this in some kind of context. Clearly, I'm very, very aware of the issues. I'm aware of the problems that people are feeling with the high...
But you don't seem to even be aware of what's going on.
I think it's important for the viewers to understand what exactly has been happening in the world to cause this crisis. And if you'd let... She absolutely hammered me on the fuel protest. I mean, it's GMTV, so you think it's going to be a little softer, but she just pulled absolutely no punches whatsoever.
Liverpool Alderhate Children's Hospital is having to cut the number of operations it's performing because they're running out of diesel. And what if your father were lying on a trolley in a hospital somewhere, awaiting an emergency operation, and he were told, sorry, we can't do the operation today, we're low on fuel?
That situation is not going to happen.
It could happen. It could happen to any one of us here.
That situation will not happen. There was a couple of times where I thought I was answering okay, and then she started chucking in about people dying in trolleys in hospitals, and I just thought, what the hell can I say to that?
He gave out the same old political answers that usually politicians do, and I have to say Blair is a lot better, actually, at relating to the people. I thought that Nick, our Prime Minister, still appeared out of touch.
While Nick's getting a pasting, Christine's called in her special political advisers to brief her on what line to take on the fuel protests.
These people essentially are putting lives at risk, and you are not prepared to tolerate it. So you are actually on the side of the person trying to get fuel at the pump, or the person trying to get an operation, not this minority who's trying to dictate fiscal policy in a way which is fundamentally undemocratic. And that is a point which will appeal to...
Prime Ministers have had special political advisers in the past, but their numbers have grown considerably under Mr. Blair. John Major had 8, Tony Blair now has 26 of these political appointees at Downing Street.
Of that, but what about the tough line of questioning, because obviously other issues will come up around this, and what I want to do is walk in prepared.
From the questions that she put to us, she does understand that this is about her getting out there and demonstrating leadership, whether it's a fuel crisis or whatever the crisis. She understands that she needs to show that A, it's not a crisis, and B, she's solving it.
This is actually one of those times, Prime Minister, when perhaps it's a leadership role that you're taking rather than being alongside public opinion. You're it.
Well, I think that that would be the first line that I would take with everything, that we have taken action. It is happening. We've got the oil companies on board.
Well, I thought she handled the meeting really well. She was kind of really firm, knew what she wanted to get out of it, was very good, very focused to keep coming back. What do I need to know? What do I need to know? I think the proof will be in the pudding, and we'll, see. But I thought in terms of her kind of command and stature, if she carries that through the day, I thought it was excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you're often criticised for the fact that perhaps the image of your government is more important than actually what goes on in government. There's a lot of spin, people say.
I've been trying to cut that out. I'm very, very aware of that, and I know how tired people get of spin, because ultimately you know, they can tell when you're not being genuine. They can tell when you're not telling the truth.
Yes, they can.
You're trying to come across as being genuine and kind of a nice guy and kind of believe me, but I was very hot and a bit flustered.
Do you know, I quite fancied him, wasn't he? And he did look very prime ministerial. He even had a touch with the Tony Blairs about him, I have to say. Do you think
Fiona,
there come a day ever...
Thanks very much. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. You're late for your next appointment already, Prime Minister.
Doesn't time go quickly?
Well,
You're enjoying yourself.
That was great, though. Thank you so much for coming in to do that.
Thanks very much. Lovely to see you again.
You too.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
Throughout the day, the people that Nick and Christine meet will mark their prime ministerial performances out of 10, and we'll see how they compare.
I think he handled it well, considering that's not what he usually does. I reckon 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10.
Impressive.
And the score from Christine's special advisors?
Well, I was torn between 7 and 8, so...
I was going to go for an 8, actually.
Yeah, okay.
Because I was
okay with 8.
really sort of quite impressed.
Yeah, definitely.
Good.
8 out of 10.
So Christine starts slightly ahead on our poll, but it's early days yet. In the fuel crisis of 2000, Mr. Blair was keen to talk up the threat to life posed by the petrol blockades.
It is not just the hospitals which need fuel, but nurses, doctors and other staff who drive to work, and of course the patients themselves. Lives are at risk if these people cannot get to work.
But in an effort to look in control, he made a statement that was to haunt him later.
We hope within the next 24 hours to have the situation on the way back to normal, though it will take longer than that to be fully back to normal.
With Nick slightly behind, he realises he too needs to call in his special advisors. Special advisors brief Tony Blair on everything from policy to handling Prime Minister's questions and the media. Nick's top priority today is to find a line to take with the press on the fuel crisis.
Hopefully we can try and get one key message that we can all get together on and discuss this morning so that we can get that going throughout the day and try and regain a bit of control on this.
Right.
I think we're at a position now that the fuel's beginning to come out. It's still very difficult out there. But in terms of the overall story, I think it's about being leadership, it's about consistency with your previous statements, it's about, on the soft focus interviews, be understanding, but be in control, be firm.
I mean, when we say 95% are in favour of the fuel protesters, is there some leeway there? Is there a number of people who you think are quite swayable and we can get them on side with the right message?
Almost certainly. I mean, it's a very large number, but I think what we need to do is to start, explaining why fuel prices are where they are.
Yeah. I think the advantage of these sorts of meetings is that they're one of the only times you can be no holds barred. Otherwise, you often have to be guarded in what you're saying. So this is a good place to thrash out the issues. And I thought as the meeting went on, he increasingly realised that was what you needed to do and what you could do. So I thought that was a quite quick learning on his part.
Nick's advisors suggest turning the argument on high fuel prices round to highlight what the government does with the taxes.
But the question is, what's the tax for? We got elected on a position of schools and hospitals first. Yeah. Absolutely vital that we, improve our schools, improve our hospitals, and it's right that the government takes decisions about how that's paid for. And you want people to understand that if you dramatically cut taxes, you've got to ask people, where do you dramatically cut spending? Yeah. And that's an absolute priority for this government.
But I think it might be worth trying to work in maybe just one message about the reality that we live in a global economy now, and that we have to sometimes take tough decisions and work out what our long-term priorities are. Yeah. And that fits very clearly with the idea that the government and the people of Britain cannot be held to ransom by a very small group of disgruntled protesters.
Sure, yeah.
He might have driven the agenda a bit more. He might have been in a real-life situation. He would have probably had a keener sense of what he wanted to focus on, and give more of an impression of not wanting to hang around because there's a huge agenda waiting for him.